for somebody to actually do them ruqya like that. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a bit, inshallah. All right. So last time, of course, our recording kept on getting disconnected. Alhamdulillah, today we've done all the ruqyas, and that way we won't have to keep on getting disconnected. All right. So last time we did actually cover the part about وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ وَمَا يَكْفُرُ بِهَا إِلَّا الْفَاسِقُونَ. We were talking about that impact that the Bani Israel that they actually had within Medina, in where they had claimed that they didn't need to follow the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't need to embrace Islam, and that it was enough for them to basically stick with the Torah and not necessarily believe in the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore that the ayat were actually responding to them that well, embracing the Prophet ﷺ is actually part of embracing the Torah, is actually part of believing the Torah, because the Torah itself was actually referring to the prophecy of a coming prophet, that is Muhammad ﷺ. So we talked about this part before, and of course the part where we kept on getting disconnected was in the second segment. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. So what happened? Well, the alternative, they had claimed that they were already believing in the Torah, so they didn't need to believe in a coming prophet or in a prophet. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala scrutinizes something really important that they were doing, which is that they were actually following magic. They were practicing magic, even though according to the Old Testament or the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 18 and also in Leviticus, I believe chapters 21 to 27, it was clearly stating that doing magic was not permissible, and that in fact the person that does magic and is engaged or is involved in sorcery, that their punishment is actually death. But here's the other thing, is that وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ, they actually, instead of following the Torah, they actually followed what the shayateen were reciting on the people during that era, during the time of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, on what was really recited. But here are a number of different questions here. Number one is, was it the shayateen, literally the devils, demons, were they the ones to actually teach magic, or what really was it? So I'm just going to first interpret the words, let me say like the surface of it, and then we'll go deeper. So, and they followed what was recited on the devils or on the demons during the time of Prophet Sulaiman. Hold on, we're going to get, is this really the translation? So I'm just going to roughly give that surface translation. And وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ, and it was not Sulaiman that had committed the distancing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that wasn't the Prophet Sallam, that wasn't Prophet Sulaiman, that had rejected the words of Allah Almighty, but it is the shayateen that had distanced themselves away from Prophet Sulaiman, distanced themselves away from Allah Almighty, and they taught the people the magic. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلِ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. Now, we're going to explain this one later, but I'm just going to explain one surface of it. And it was not revealed onto the two angels in the city of Babylon. Harut and Marut were the two angels. Now, the other recitation or the other interpretation, and it was not revealed, that is, magic was not revealed onto the two angels in the city of Babylon, and the two angels Harut and Marut. Well, let's move on with a couple of different things. Is this really as surface as the interpretation like that, or is there really more to it? So a number of different questions we're trying to answer today, inshallah. Number one is that, is magic real? That's number one. And is magic necessarily, what what usually would be manipulating that you're doing a certain behavior, but you're not really doing that behavior. You're really just tricking, and where the person didn't recognize what you had done? Or is magic, what is referred to here, really involving magic spells? What really are magic spells? So, magic spells would really involve some type of words in where the person is calling on to the devils or the jinn or the demons, and then the jinn or the demons are doing the requested, let's say the requested behavior, the requested purpose, or the requested need, and then they would basically be doing something that you don't see. In other words, causing harm to someone or somebody or something without the person recognizing where that harm is from. In other words, it is something within, let's call it the supernatural, something that is at least beyond the physics, it's metaphysics. It's something beyond what we know of the different physics that are around us. Is this really what it is? So this is one part of the question that we're going to answer. And the other part, was there anything that involved the Prophet ﷺ having any spells on him? Is that even true? And if we are to say that there was any magic spell that involved the Prophet ﷺ, how did he deal with it? Or what was that even at all anything real? Was that even authentic in any way? So those are some of the questions that we want to answer, hopefully, inshallah. Other questions. Is ruqya something that we could do? Can we get paid for ruqya? Can we pay somebody for ruqya? Nushra, can we use magic to let's decode, let's call it that way. In other words, break another magic. In other words, we've got a magic, so we're now trying to do another form of magic to break the first magic. Is this something that at all is permissible, or is it something that we're allowed to do? The other thing is that if magic is real, all right, what is the punishment for a person that practices magic? And it's the magic that happens at the circus, for example, the same magic that is referred to in this ayah or in other ayat. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about, inshallah, today. Really a lot of questions and a lot of different verses to, I would say, to bring about and I would say probably, scrutinize and bring about to the surface, because there's so many different questions that usually relate to relate to this topic. And definitely, because it's a mysterious topic, people are really always, excited to learn about this. So I'm excited to talk about it too. So let's just look into a number of different things. So they followed what was revealed unto shayateen, but are the shayateen necessarily human shayateen, or are they devil shayateen? What kind of shayateen is it really referring to? So there are actually differences of opinions between scholars. I'm going to take you to another screen just so that we could see some of those verses that really discuss, that relate to this matter. So the first one is that it says وَلَا يُفْلِحُ السَّاحِرُ حَيْثُ أَتَى. So you can see it's in Surah Taha. أَفَتَأْتُونَ السِّحْرَ وَأَنْتُمْ تُبْصِرُونَ. Don't worry, I'll translate what these words mean. يُخَيَّلُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ سِحْرِهِمْ أَنَّهَا تَسْعَى. So the first one in Surah Taha, it says وَلَا يُفْلِحُ السَّاحِرُ حَيْثُ أَتَى, bringing a complete and an absolute determination that no matter what a magician would ever do, he would never be successful. Let's go for the other one. So what does this really mean? When we say they'll never be successful, does that mean that if we are to determine and say that it would never be successful, that it's all fake and it's all really never going to get to the purpose that it was that they intended to get to. So that's a whole different discussion. All right, I'm just going to look into these verses, and then we're going to get to why we're bringing up these verses. All right. أفتأتون السحر وأنتم تبصرون. Do you commit magic when you could actually see? What does that mean? So in other words, you practice magic and you manipulate people's eyes with it. So there's that other piece that some scholars said that magic is not necessarily referring to the spells per se, but it is actually referring to the type of manipulation in where, somebody can, put a coin in front of you and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to, I'm going to let the coin be in your other hand, when in reality, they probably just put it in their sleeve or whatever it is. And then it appears to you that it was some kind of not a manipulation, but some kind of a metaphysical thing that just happened. So in other words, this based on this ayah, the scholars that said it was more of a manipulation and not something that had anything to do with supernatural / or anything that was relating to physics and the physics around us. So the other ayah, يخيل إليه من سحرهم أنها تسعى. يخيل إليه من سحرهم أنها تسعى. That based on this ayah, يخيل إليه, that they would imagine, in other words, they were really manipulated to see from the magic that they were doing that the ropes were really in movement, were really in motion. They were really doing something. Now the other this ayah in particular, the scholars actually said, or some scholars actually said, using this ayah or basing it on this ayah, is that it is nothing but an imagination, but a manipulation, and that there is nothing real about magic. Well, guess what? Majority of the scholars actually disagreed with this opinion and said that this is one type of magic, but this is not all the types of magic. That there are types of magic where it can harm the person, even if that person is not necessarily under their hand. So, for example, a person being far away, we're doing some form of magic on that person, but we can't necessarily harm anybody on the street like that. We need to actually gather some pieces of information to know who we're ordering the jinn to harm. We're going to get to what is used. All right. The other part is that the ayah says, وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. So in Surah Al-Falaq, it was actually asking us to seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the harm of the women that actually that would blow inside the magic strings or magic spells that they were trying to do. So what is this talking about? Witches? Well, here's the thing, is that, so why does it really here speak about the women witches or the women that were doing the magic and not the men? Well, that was because it was very common that the Arab believed that women used to be the ones to do the magic and not necessarily the men. Unlike the different cultures in where they associated magic because it was really men that were experts in magic, the Arab were not experts in magic. In fact, the Yahud were the ones at the time, the Jews were the ones that were experts in doing magic. And that's why when they went to Medina, they were really concerned. Even the Muslims were really concerned that the Yahud were going to be doing some form of magic. And they thought, because no Muslim family had conceived any child, they thought that there was some kind of a magic spell that was done on them for a while. The Yahud were the experts, but not only the Yahud, it was also the people in Al-Kildaniyin, at the time, it was really Iraq, it was really Persia, but it actually dates back to the Kildani, the Babylon civilizations that used to use magic as a way to control, as a way to manipulate, and of course, as a way to, again, believe. So it was a part of their faith. The other people that used magic were really the ancient Egyptians. When you're looking at ancient Egyptians, it was generally, so we're looking at 3,900 BC. So we're talking about close to 4,000 years before Prophet Isa alayhi salam. They were also using magic. But here's one thing, is that not all magic that was practiced in the different civilizations was really practiced in the same way. So the people in Persia, and why is this even important? This is important to discuss because we're looking at the influences that influenced the Arab and influenced how they perceived magic, or how they perceived spells and supernatural things. All right. So the Arab happened to be in the middle between, of course, we're talking about the Arabian Peninsula, what is today in Iraq, what is today as Saudi Arabia, Yemen, that's the Arabian Peninsula. All right. Yemen, Oman, Kuwait, all those, that's the Arabian Peninsula. All right. Now, the Persians, which dates back to the Chaldani and the Babylon empires, or the Babylon, of course, civilizations, was really what is referred to also here. All right. So that's why we're talking about them. Or I know, sorry, I forgot that you couldn't see the ayat. All right, no, it was actually, all right, what was really referred to right there, Babel. Now, in the other civilization, which was the ancient Egyptians, they actually used magic, but their type of magic was very different from the Persians. The Persians used magic, and they mixed magic with astrology. All right, so they were doing some form of connecting with the demons or the devils, and also using their knowledge about astrology, their knowledge about astronomy, in where they believed in astrology. So astronomy is different than astrology, because astronomy is really the science of studying space, but astrology is trying to connect some form of belief, in where they would relate that there are supernatural powers to the different celestial beings, or the different things we see in space, and regard that those things have some form of a power, an impact in our lives, in our relationship with one another, and just like the horoscopes, and where they connect to us somehow, and that the people that die in this world, they eventually become a planet or a star in space, and that has some impact on our lives. All right, so that was that during the time of the Babylonians, that was their belief. But in the ancient Egyptian in the ancient Egyptian civilization, they actually used a different kind of a magic. The kind of magic that the ancient Egyptians used was really a mixture of science with, let's say, the manipulation. So they used science, they used mathematics, they used chemistry, their knowledge about chemistry, their knowledge about physics, science, the different things that they had learned about the different elements that surround us. In other words, basically science, and they mixed it with different ways to control. So it was really abusing people's ignorance about, the different principles, or the different features that chemical elements might have, or the different, or knowing how physics works, or different things, and how they could make a certain energy move in a certain way with physics. And then they would use their knowledge, relating to what they knew about the different elements, and they would use that knowledge in order to manipulate the masses by abusing their ignorance about those matters. Now, the Arab, on the other hand, they actually used to think that magic actually changes. In other words, it really changes the elements of things. So they really did not know the whole deal about magic, and that it is really a form of manipulation, and that you're really not necessarily changing the actual principle of things. The Arab didn't really know much about it. So that's why they used to believe that the Prophet ﷺ was a magician, because they were capable of seeing that the Prophet ﷺ was capable of getting mu'jizat, getting miracles, but they understood that the miracles which they had seen, they didn't want to attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or any super power, or any supernatural being like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they actually, of course, what I mean by supernatural, meaning something that is beyond physics. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, we're looking at something beyond the creation. They didn't want to attribute it to that. So they attributed as it is some form of changing the quality of something by making something evil and magic. So that's what the Arab really thought about magic. They didn't really know much about it. They were really crude in their knowledge about magic. Now, the Yahud definitely knew more about magic, which is why they were actually the experts in the Arabian Peninsula in magic, because they got the information from during the time of the Babylonians, and also during the time of their stay in ancient Egypt. They definitely are experts. Today, even the ones to be experts in magic are really in Nablus. The best experts in magic are really in Nablus, and they're really the Jews in Samira or in Nablus. All right, they're the experts. They're only 700 people, but they're actually the ones to get the big money and the big chunks to do that magic. So let's we're putting in a number of different pieces of information, because we're going to come to the final conclusion. So right there, that piece of information, knowing about the history, is really to help us in understanding and unlocking certain parts in this ayah. So, ala mulki Sulaiman. So, were shayateen necessarily the humans, or were they necessarily not humans, but people? Well, we know in a number of different ayat that shayateen can actually be referred to human beings. All right, and not necessarily shayateen to mean jinn or anything of that sort. So they followed what was recited on the shayateen, or what the shayateen recited, whether it was human beings or whether it was the jinn. All right, differences of opinions whether this is only referring to people or whether this is referring to jinn. Ala mulki Sulaiman. What does Prophet Sulaiman have to do anything with the story? So to unlock that piece of it is that the Jews that were in Medina, they believed that Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not a prophet, but was a magician, that he was actually a king, and a king that was capable of doing a magic, which they had said that it was really the shayateen that taught Prophet Sulaiman, that taught King, of course, to them, King Sulaiman the magic, and that's why he was capable of getting this magnificent kingdom. But of course, for the Muslimin, Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not doing magic, which is why this ayah says, وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. This ayah was to totally refute what the Bani Israel and the Jews were saying in Medina, and said, وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman. It was not Sulaiman that was actually a kafir. What is that supposed to be referring to? Well, this is supposed to be referring that somebody that practices magic is actually, or practicing magic is actually a form of deviation, to the point that is actually believing in the power of the shayateen, or in the power of jinn, rather than the power of Allah Almighty, in where the person had totally been totally been manipulated by the power of shayateen, that he started taking them as the supernatural power, and therefore neglected or totally went into a disbelief in Allah Almighty, which is why this ayah is emphasizing وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not teaching magic, was not dealing and working with magic, and in fact, that in emphasizing that Prophet Sulaiman was not a kafir, was not somebody that was a disbeliever, but was in fact a believer, and one cannot whatsoever attribute magic to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. In fact, and as a matter of fact, it was really the shayateen that had disbelieved or committed disbelief, that when they were teaching people magic. Well, wait a minute. So what type of magic were they really teaching? Was it the type of magic that was just like the one that was done in ancient Egypt, where Prophet Musa alayhi salam himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُخَيَّلُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ سِحْرِهِمْ أَنَّهَا تَسْعَى, in where he would get into this imagination where he would think that the ropes were really moving, when in reality, they were probably inserting some chemical stuff inside those ropes, making them appear to the person observing this that it was really changing the actual substance from being a rope to really becoming a snake. In other words, making it from one matter to another matter, and therefore giving the impression for the masses that it was really by the power of the Pharaoh himself, that if he's capable of changing the elements, then therefore he's capable of creating, or he's capable of having superpowers of changing everything that surrounds us, and that he was somehow directly connected with God Almighty. Now, when you look at this ayah, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ, was actually telling us that what the type of magic that the Bani Israel had accused Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was doing was really the different type of magic, and where they related it, that it was related to some form of astrology, some form of connecting with the demons, some form of connecting with things in the space, etc. And of course, what they mean by that was a form of connecting with the stars, etc. Now, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. So وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. So here's another thing. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. Is this really talking about angels, or is this talking about kings? Now, bear with me right here. Some scholars said وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ is actually saying that no training was revealed by angels. So no, angels did not reveal magic. Angels did not come with magic or train people to do magic. Well, what is this story about? Well, the Yahud actually thought, and they had claimed, that magic was actually taught by angels. And that angels, and the two angels of Harut and Marut, they actually came to teach people magic. In other words, the Bani Israel, the Yahud, considered that magic was some form of practicing divine practice, or some form of practicing some like righteousness, because it's supposed to be doing some kind of a replication, or some kind of a work of what the angels themselves taught. So this ayah said, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ, that magic and the manipulation and the magic spells were not revealed onto the two angels in the city of Babylon, the two angels Harut and Marut. So that's the first interpretation, that it was not revealed. In other words, the angels did not actually teach magic. Harut and Marut angels did not teach magic. And as a matter of fact, the people attributed magic to, first they attributed to Prophet Sulaiman, and then they attributed to the angels. So the ayah was coming to totally reject such claims, وَمَا أُنزِلَ, and it was not revealed on the two angels. Now, another interpretation is that what they were doing is that وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. But the shayateen, they were the ones that had committed distancing themselves from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other words, disbelief, when they had taught the people magic, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed on the two angels in Harut and Marut was not magic, but it was actually to bring about to people what the manipulation really happens and how it happens, in order to bring it to their attention that those people and what the magicians were really doing was a form of manipulation and is not a form of a supernatural action. It's not therefore a miracle. So of course, when you're looking at this ayah, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ, there is another قراءة Ibn Abbas, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلِكَيْنِ, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلِكَيْنِ, and what was revealed or what was sent onto the two kings. In other words, during the two kings, Harut and Marut, the two kings, and they were actually revealing to the people how the manipulation actually happens, in order to show them how this is actually how the fitna happens, how the trial happens, how the manipulation happens. So it was really a practice. That was really a practice. That is what the two kings that were teaching them, the two kings, and some actually said they were two kings, but they were ala al-malikain, not two kings necessarily, but during the era of the two kings, and that there were angels telling they were becoming in a form of human being and telling them how the manipulation actually happens, in order to protect people from the manipulation. And they would come to them, they were coming to them and telling them how the manipulation happens, in order to protect them from the kufr that was taking place. So they would say, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. In other words, we're teaching you what is done and how they do it, but be careful from using it to manipulate others. In other words, this is how others are manipulating you, but make sure you don't use it to manipulate others with it. This is just to explain it to you. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. So do not engage in disbelief. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. Well, from this ayah, I actually want to go to another hadith. All right, what really happened with the Prophet ﷺ himself? There is a story about the Prophet ﷺ himself actually facing magic. What is the story about that? So this is actually going to take us to another one. So here we go. Let's go for this one. All right, let's go for that one and actually read this hadith. All right, Bismillah. So Sayyida Aisha actually narrated a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, here's the hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ had actually been under a magic spell. All right, to the point that he used to imagine that he was doing certain things and he was not really doing them. Until one day he started making dua. So he started invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, I felt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had answered my prayer, answered my dua. And two men came to me. The two men came to him. Those were actually angels. So what were they doing here? They were asking questions. The first one was actually standing up above near his head, and the other one was standing near his legs. The first one says, "What's wrong with the man?" And the other one responds, "He has a magic spell." And then the other one says, "Who was the one that did this?" He said, the other one responded, "His name is Labid ibn al-A'sam." He said, "In what? Using what?" And he responds, he used pieces and particles, in other words, pieces of hair that were stuck on a brush, and using a pollen from a male palm tree. And he said, "And where is it?" And he said, "It is in the well of Dharwan." It's a particular known well in Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ went to it, or there's another narration that the Prophet ﷺ actually sent some Sahaba to fetch it. So then they came with it. And then they came with what the Prophet ﷺ was told where it is. And then he said, the nakhl, the palm tree that is, of course, the palm plant within that magic spell that was done, it seemed and it appeared like it was the heads of shayateen. And then he later said, there is actually another narration where that malak, that angel, later teaches him how to perform ruqya. So he starts reading قل أعوذ برب الفلق, قل أعوذ برب الناس 3 times, قل أعوذ برب الفلق 3 times, قل هو الله أحد, or Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times, and starts blowing and actually wipes over his body. So the other one, of course, you could see the continuing the narration in where that later the Prophet ﷺ was totally healed, and they were wondering, why didn't you do anything about it, even though you knew who was doing this? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that he worried that it would be spread amongst people, this evil, and then they just basically totally closed down that particular well. This hadith is actually in Bukhari and Muslim. Of course, so many different questions come out from this hadith. There was actually a whole, I would say, debate among Muslim scholars regarding this hadith. This hadith is actually narrated by a number of different scholars, all right? Yes, you could see it's narrated Bukhari, Muslim, so it is definitely authentic. Then you had differences of interpretations, let's say it that way. And where you had some scholars actually reject that this can be taken whatsoever as true, not because it's narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, but you had modern scholars specifically, and some, they're called Mu'tazila, that actually said that this can't be that the Prophet ﷺ was actually under a magic spell, because, and of course, let's take it to this part of it. Right. So we'll take it to this one. Can you guys actually see it? Yes, you can. So when we're looking at this, you could see their objection. I'm just going to go to their objection really quick. These are parts of their objection. They had objected and said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that they had said in tattabi'una illa rajulan mas'hura, that they had claimed that that is the people that had rejected Islam. They said, you follow a man that is pricked by magic, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, انظر كيف ضربوا لك الأمثال فضلوا فلا يستطيعون سبيلا. That look at how they would bring about those examples, but there's no way that they can get to causing harm to you. And of course, The ayat were, as in Surah Al-Furqan right there, as in Surah Al-Isra, were rejecting that the Prophet ﷺ was whatsoever under any type of a magic spell. So here's the thing, is that when you actually go back to this hadith actually says, كَانَ يُخَيَّرُ إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ يَفْعَلُ الشَّيْءَ وَمَا يَفْعَلُ. Now, the scholars that responded to this, they said, well, if you look at this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is a human being and was actually imagining, in other words, in a form of some type of hallucination during that time, that he was doing something. In another hadith, in another narration, it actually said that he thought that he was being intimate with his wives and he really wasn't. In other words, they said, well, this is actually speaking about a harm that was affecting his body and not necessarily his mental state. So why even talk about this? Well, that was really because they regarded that this can bring about lots of misconceptions and that people can claim that the Prophet ﷺ might have also been under some form of hallucination, under some form of manipulation, in where he was himself manipulated and then probably making up ayat that were not actually revealed to him. So the response is that the Prophet ﷺ was clearly, based on this hadith, is that he was clearly getting the impact and the influence was on his body and not necessarily something that impacted his ability to reveal the message that was sent on to him. This was definitely very temporary, and the Prophet ﷺ was capable of recognizing what was happening to him, which is why he kept on doing dua. He was capable of recognizing that there's something physically wrong. In other words, the magic affected his body and not necessarily his prophethood in delivering the message. And of course, he was infallible from confusing anything in the message that was revealed onto him, which is when you actually look at the different scholars that responded to us. You could see Shafi'i, Nawawi, Al-Amidi, a number of different scholars had actually responded to it, that in the end, or even Al-Maziri, in the end, is that it affected the Prophet ﷺ's body, and that this hadith is actually an authentic hadith. And then later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually protected the Prophet ﷺ from this spell by revealing and sending the malaika to make sure that no further harm continues on the body of the Prophet ﷺ, and that in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also emphasizes وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, that the Prophet ﷺ, as in Surah Al-Najm, says that the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, that he does not speak of himself, but is actually a wahyun yuha. It is actually a revelation from an angel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends to the Prophet ﷺ, and is not something that the Prophet ﷺ was in any form or any type of a magic influence. So this is in order to complete that explanation. When we speak about that hadith, and many times people would want to say that, no, this isn't true. How can that happen? Well, it is something very temporary that happened to the Prophet ﷺ, affected his body, and just like it can affect the Prophet ﷺ, it can affect us too. So looking at this hadith, let's take you back to this hadith. Looking at this hadith, you could definitely see where it is actually narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, just like the Prophet ﷺ was actually harmed by this type of magic. Even as us, no matter how religious you are, it can actually affect you. So what do we do when we actually are pricked with magic? What should we do? I'm actually going to take you to a number of different things. Number one is that when we're actually doing ruqya, what is ruqya? You can actually do ruqya in many different ways. I'm going here to open, let's see what, you can do ruqya in many different ways. The first type of ruqya that you could do is really by reading Qul huwallahu ahad 3 times, Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq 3 times, قل أعوذ برب الناس 3 times, and then you're going to read it while your palms, as if you're going to wash your face. So you're reading it, and then you're going to blow, not necessarily spit, but blow 3 times. You're going to be blowing 3 times, and you could actually do it yourself. You don't necessarily need someone to do it for you. You could actually do it yourself. And this is really sad that many times you could see that people might actually abuse your need for ruqya and actually charge you thousands of dollars. So is it actually haram to charge someone? The answer is no, it's not haram to charge someone to perform ruqya. So what's the evidence on that? Well, the evidence really is a story that was mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari. All right. Now, the story mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari says, goes this way. So these group of Sahaba, man, it is so windy outside. It is so windy. I think it's almost 30 miles per hour. So these group of Sahaba, they basically go on a mission, and they're far away, but then they go to this village. Clearly they were really dehydrated, hungry, and this village, they came to them and they asked them for food, but they refused to give them food. So they came to them again and they said, our chieftain is actually harmed by magic. Do you have any form of ruqya that you could actually help us with to get our chieftain cured? So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says yes, but on a condition that you would give me 30 heads of sheep. And so Abu Sa'id al-Khudri goes and reads al-Fatiha 7 times. All right, reads al-Fatiha 7 times and actually gets that man, that chieftain, cured. He reads the Fatiha 7 times, and the hadith said, كَأَنَّمَا نَشِطَ مِنْ عِقَالٍ. In other words, it was like as if it was a horse that was tied up, and all of a sudden it's like he became untied. He got cured. So they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they told him the story. And the Prophet ﷺ said, asked him, how did you know it contained ruqya? Like, how did you know that it contained some form of healing? And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri responded that it was something that he felt that it can actually give ruqya and it can cure that man. And it did. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Idribu li ma'akum bisam." It's like, well, give me also, give me part of what you had been paid, which is the 30 heads of sheep. All right, like give me a, what do they call that? Sahm is like, give me a, how do you say it in English? A share. There you go. So give me a share, and he really got a share from that 30 heads of sheep. All right. So from that hadith, and that was actually the basis for those that had for the scholars that said that you can actually charge somebody for ruqya, and they based it on that hadith. But here are a number of different things here. Is that unfortunately, it's actually not necessarily, I would say, a knowledge that somebody could somehow claim to have, because there's really no ayah or hadith other than the parts about, like this hadith about reading Qul huwallahu ahad, Qul a'udhu birabbin nas, let's call them the 3 quls. All right, that one in Surah Al-Fatiha were really the only ones that were mentioned to have some form of ruqya. But can we actually do ruqya using other ayat? All right, using other ayat. Can we use other ayat to do ruqya? And can ruqya be based on experiment? So what does that mean? So, for example, I come to, let's pick a name. I come to Idil, okay? And Idil she gets some water, drinking water, purified, great value drinking water, and she reads on them not Surah al-Mu'awwidh, not the three quls, but instead she reads Surah al-Safat. All right. And sure, it did actually work in where she had a number of people come to her home and she would read Surah al-Safat and she would pour over these people's bodies and they would get cured. And she started making it as a business. You come to her and she's got all these great value, purified drinking water that she read Surah al-Safat on. And she's selling every single bottle, 16.9 ounce a bottle. She's selling it for $20. And you would pour it over the person. And hey, I can't guarantee you cure, but I've done it many times. And people started saying, yeah, it really worked. And yeah, my daughter got cured and my son got cured and so forth. But here's the thing. Although there is a hadith where in Sahih Muslim, لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. There's no harm. It's not haram to do ruqya as long as there's no shirk involved. All right. But yes, it is actually halal to do ruqyas in ayat. But what is happening right now is that a lot of people, I would say, are taking advantage of people's need and claiming to have some form of ilm in ruqya when they really don't really have any of that. It is really more based on, some scholars or some people, they had done some certain things and it became something that I would say practiced later, and it was really more of experience in terms of personal experience, and not necessarily based on it. So we don't have not a single book of hadith, not a single book of fiqh, not a single book where it says, here are the methods to cure from magic, or here are the methods, or those are the things that you need to do. Hit them on their leg, hit them on their toe, or whatever it is, or, pour water over them, etc. There is really no evidence on any of that. In any hadith, any book of fiqh, any book of Islam that scholars had actually taken as genuine, as authentic to actually cure from such things. So what to do? Well, save your money. Don't go to anybody. You could do it yourself. And here we go. You could see, simple and really clear. All you need to do, ayat, go for ruqya shar'iyya, and you've got all these right there. Those are just ayat in where they will just read ayat, different ayat from different surahs. This is also right there. There you've got where it will read on and on and on for 9 hours and 57 minutes, on and on and on. You can also do different ayat. So let's see. Look, the CIA even has the ayat ruqya shar'iyya. See, they want to cure you. All right. So you've got all over here. You've got those different ayat. Here we go. You can read these. This is from Surah Al-Fatiha. You got from Surah Al-Baqara, إلهكم إله إن في خلق السماوات والأرض, etc. You've got different ayat. Here we go. You could read this on and on and on. You've got different ayat, and they've got right there. You've got the reference, and it'll tell you which ayat it is, and you can read these ayat right there. You've got these different hadith or these different du'as. Bismillahi أرقيك من كل شيء يؤذيك من شر كل نفس أو عين حاسد الله يشفيك بسم الله أرقيك. You've got different أدعية. أذهب البأس رب الناس أذهب البأس واشف أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاء واشفه شفاء لا يغادر سقما means, O Lord Almighty, reveal or uplift this magic or uplift this harm or this illness, and you are the one that brings cure. So you've got أعوذ بالله أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. I seek refuge by the words of Allah Almighty التامات من شر ما خلق, from every evil thing that he had created. So there are actually a number of different du'as that you could do. That's enough. You don't need to hire anybody. You don't need to, and it's not like somebody has some kind of a magic power where they will cure anybody. You could do it yourself. What were some of the things? I've had different people actually insist that I would do it for them, and I did it for them. Not necessarily that I didn't do it for them, just because they felt comfortable that, no, we want you to do it. And some of the experience that I actually got indeed was really, I would say, was really strange. I used to not believe in magic spells and all the influence of jinn, etc. And I used to, be more of a person that would want to believe that all this is more of a psychological impact and not anything real. But I must admit, there were some stories that I don't have answers to, but it really made me question a lot of what I used to think. Some of the stories, for example, I had one of the strangest stories, I would say two strange stories. I had an African-American non-Muslim girl that called me, and she said that she was getting voices telling her that she was supposed to be going to a Muslim scholar. So her family, who was not Muslim, first of all, the girl was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Well, absolutely, she's got diagnosed with schizophrenia. If she's going to be saying she's hearing voices, she's going to be saying that, different things. She's, of course, she's going to be diagnosed with that. So she actually came to my office and she insisted that the voices were telling her that she has to contact a Muslim scholar. Her family looked up online and searched for a Muslim scholar nearby, got a hold of my phone number, contacted me. She came to my office. Her family dropped her off, and she was 19 years old and came in. So when she came in, you could clearly see this girl is weak. She is on certain meds for schizophrenia. And of course, I asked her what was wrong, and she said she was hearing these voices. Said, how many are they? And she said 18. Said, where did you get the number 18? And she said, they speak to me. So I said, okay, let's see what we could do. Do you speak Arabic? No, I don't. All right. So I started reading. She said, actually, before that, I said, what did they tell you that you need to do? And she said, they told me that you're supposed to be reading something on me to get them out. This is what she was saying. I just said, okay, let's do some reading here. So I faked reading. And I said, if you feel anything, tell me what you're feeling. Just tell me what's going on. So here it is. She was sitting down and I started faking reading that I'm reading verses. But in reality, I was just saying gibberish, really. I was faking it that it was Arabic. And she was just sitting normally. So then I started, and I was reading it like it was Arabic. So she was just sitting normally. And then I started reading real Arabic, and you're just saying whatever, but I was sounding it like it was Quran, just saying anything. I went to coffee and I drank coffee and all the, just saying anything, normal day stuff, but in Arabic. And I was pretending that I was really reading Quran. She was just sitting normally. I said, okay. She was, I was alternating between the different words that I'm saying. So then I started reading. I didn't say, I didn't pause. I was going along. So I was saying Arabic words, making it sound like it was Quran. And then I would start reading Quran. But when I would read Quran, now mind you, this girl does not speak Arabic. whenever I would read certain ayat that, with my experience, are the most powerful ayat in ruqya. And with my experience, the most powerful ayat in ruqya is basically this ayah that you see in front of you, right there, this ayah, and Surah Al-Safat, Surah Surah Al-Safat, parts of Surah Al-Ahqaf, Ayat Al-Kursi, parts of Surah Yunus. Those are, from my experience, those were the most powerful ayat, powerful to the point that I could really see the person in front of me relate to them, even if they didn't speak Arabic. So this girl was shaking, and was really like as if she was having a seizure. And the way that she was shaking was not any type of a shaking that any person can actually do. So even if I were to tell you to shake your hand or shake your body so fast, you would not actually be capable of doing it, just because your muscles, you can't move your hands that fast or your body that fast unless it was involuntary. And I would keep on switching, and then all of a sudden, this girl starts screaming and saying, "Get me out, get me out." So I would switch onto different ayat, or different words, not ayat, but different words in Arabic, and then she would calm. And then when I start reading only the ayat ruqya, she would start screaming, "Stop, stop, stop. I'll get out. Just get me out, get me out. I want to get out, get me out." And she would start moving in very scary way. I was the only one in my office, but I continued, in the end, in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-hami. Now, one thing that I would like to say before doing any ruqya, do not do ruqya at all to anyone, perform it to anyone, unless that particular day, and I learned my lesson the hard way, unless that day after Salat al-Fajr, you would say 100 times, لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير, 100 times during that Fajr of that day, 100 times. Based on the hadith that the shayateen, the jinn, cannot harm you if you actually say that ruqya on yourself. So before you do it to perform ruqya on someone else, you need to do it on yourself 100 times that morning. In fact, do the ruqya on yourself before you do the ruqya on someone else. I've got many stories. I don't want to scare you, but this one, I think this is enough. This is enough to scare you and make you not sleep that day. I had another incident where a Hindu girl, non-Muslim girl, Hindu girl, came to my office. She was specialized in political science. And this Hindu girl, again, doesn't speak Arabic. She was from India, studies at the University of Minnesota, was actually doing her postgraduate in political science, and said that she had went to gurus and even Christian priests. She was seeking healing for what she was going through, no matter what religion that is. She was just sick and tired of what was going on with her. It started out with some Hindu priests, or I'm not sure what they call them, Hindu monks, whatever they call them, did some kind of a, I don't know, thing that they were doing on her. And later she was always not capable of sleeping because she was hearing these different things that were surrounding her. And she finally decided that she wanted to come to a Muslim. So she comes to me, and I start doing the same thing that I did to this the non-Muslim African-American girl, reading, just saying Arabic words and repeating it as if it was Quran, and the same voice, that is, and doing it in English, in Arabic. And I wouldn't translate what I'm saying. I would just read it, and then you could see where she would start screaming whenever it's ayat al-ruqya. Only ayat al-ruqya. So if I'm reading, for example, ayat from Surah al-Talaq, she would just be sitting down normally. Only ayat al-ruqya that, with my experience, I would know that those are ayat al-ruqya, and very strong whenever I would read them on anyone that might have any type of a spell or anything like that, that they would really react to it. And she was screaming in her loudest voice, I'm burning, I'm burning, I'm burning. In her loudest voice, I'm burning, I'm burning, I'm burning. And she was pointing out where she was burning from ayat al-ruqya, from those ayat. So, all I could say all I could say is, subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals what, from the Quran, what contains the shifa, what contains the cure, what contains the healing. You don't have to go to anyone. No one. The ayat are in the Quran. You don't have to go to any particular person. You don't have to book an appointment and pay $6,000 to get an appointment for anybody to do ruqya for you. You could do it by yourself. The ayat, like I showed you, they're right there. You could Google them. They're right there. YouTube, I just showed you those ayat. You could go to those ayat and actually get them. So can I use nushra? Can I go to another person to make a spell, to unspell the first spell? The answer is, scholars actually had differences of opinions on that. The majority actually regarded it as going and believing in sihr in itself is actually haram. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib was the only scholar. Actually, there were two other ones that actually said that you can use a type of a spell to unspell, but the majority of scholars actually said that that is engaging in magic, and magic in Islam is actually haram, period. Whether going to a magician or actually in doing magic in itself is actually haram. And in fact, scholars had differences of opinions on whether the person is to be executed for doing magic, or whether it is only in, like a Shafi'iyya regarded that it is only when that particular type of magic, and different magicians that had done tawbah, that they had said that that type of magic is known to have the ability to kill somebody. In other words, if that person does or engages in a type of magic that can lead to killing somebody, that's when they would have the punishment of getting executed. Then they had differences of opinions on whether women can also, in the Hanafi madhab, regarded that women cannot be executed even if they do magic. So long for the witches that were all those killed in Europe. And they considered that women cannot be killed even if they were doing magic or involved in doing magic, and regarded that they would only be imprisoned. They would be imprisoned to make sure that the rest of the community is safe from their actions. I would also like to point that Tahir ibn Ashur had mentioned three very important elements that affects many people from magic. And he mentions that number one is that magic cannot actually happen unless the person himself actually goes into a weak mental state. What does that mean? In other words, these people become psychologically in belief that this person has superpowers. This person has powers that can affect me. And that's when, once you go into the psychological mental state in believing that you are weak and that person is strong, that's when they will definitely have a grip on you. So that was the first thing. The second thing he said is that there are different types of magic, and where one involves a form of trick, in where they might actually tell you, hey, I want you to get me like henna, or get me some certain body fluids, and usually using body fluids, whether it's menstrual bleeding or whether it's hair, or different pieces of body, or even if it's clothes that person wears. Well, why do they actually even use that? clothes the person wears might be you wanted to make a spell on somebody, so you will get a garment that contains their sweat. Well, why their sweat and why menstrual bleeding and why all that yucky stuff? So the reason why is because jinn, in order to control the jinn or to have the jinn actually do some form of magic on you, they don't actually know you by your name. They know you by your smell, which is really like animals, or dogs, specifically dogs. Dogs are ummatun min al jinn. Dogs have a trait of jinn too. So dogs, just like they know you by your smell, same thing with jinn. Jinn recognize you by your smell. So they don't have a profile of your name, but they actually have a profile for you based on your smell. So that's how they could actually do some type of influence or power over you to harm you in any way by recognizing the victim, let's say it that way, the victim based on their smell. Magic can only do harm. Magic can never do good. So don't expect to use magic to, I don't know, make you pass a test. All right. Magic is only done to harm people and not to do good in any way, which is why this ayah actually says, فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ, that they would actually learn what would actually do yufarriquna, what would differentiate, in other words, separate between the husband and the wife, between the husband, in other words, the married couple. And that's why that ayah is emphasizing that magic can no way be to bring good. It is only done to prick and do harm. And the ayah continues, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ. This one is mad lazim kalimi muthaqal, and they cannot harm anyone except by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does that really mean? وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, meaning that in the end, does that mean that it could still harm? So if it says وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ, and they can't really harm unless by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So can the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually happen? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permit, in other words, will that, yes, that type of magic that a person might do actually cause harm? The answer is yes. But in the end, even though, yes, magic can harm someone, but you always want to remember that you want to hold on and connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not connect to people. And you want to remember, connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers. And in the end, وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُم, that they would learn what harms them. In other words, magic only brings harm and not good. And magic is not something to be afraid of necessarily, but you always want to do the ruqya on yourself, the ruqya on your children. Hasad is real, envy is real, magic is real, and it is definitely, you could see mentioned in the Quran, and majority of scholars regarded it that yes, even magic spells are real. In fact, Ibn al-Qayyim says that magic that is referred to in the Quran, like I said, there are different types of magic, but part of the magic is, as Ibn al-Qayyim had actually defined it, عقد ورقى أو كلام يتكلم به الساحر, that there are actually different knots that the magician might tie in where they would say certain words, and those words are supposed to be calling on to the jinn to harm the person, to inflict some kind of harm, to some kind of let's say unease as well, depending on what is intended. And in the end, and it will affect the person without even touching the person. So they might take some of pieces of your hair, pieces of your clothes, and then probably put it at your doorstep, or probably put it in the couch, slip it in the couch, or probably slip it in, under your house, or in the soil outside, or probably bury it in a graveyard, or probably bury it in, or even throw it in the sea. And then it becomes this message to be sent for different jinn in order to gain, to gain some kind of power, and then it affects the person. So how does it really happen? Again, it's using jinn power to harm the person, but in the end, hang on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do the ruqya yourself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that they will not harm anyone unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it. So hang on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless of who and what is actually happening. وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. And they knew, of course, why? Because, well, they considered the Bani Israel, they had actually considered that Prophet Sulaiman ﷺ taught them magic, even though the Torah was telling them that magic is actually haram, as in Leviticus and even in Deuteronomy, but they still actually practice such things. And وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. And in the end is that when they might actually get paid to do the magic, but in the end is that definitely they will not get any good, they will not get any reward in the akhirah, and in the end it is definitely the worst share, the worst replacement or alternative, or the worst thing that they could actually take in compensation for, which is by actually giving themselves their life and even the purpose of their life, giving it up just for the sake of a couple dollars or a couple dollars or a couple pieces of gold, in order to, of course, gain some kind of power. But in the end, they had really lost themselves. لو كانوا يعلمون, if they had really known what this magic was really going to bring them, nothing but harm, and nothing but harm to the victim and harm to themselves for doing that particular piece of magic. So here it says, Ian is telling me about Harry Potter. I did not watch Harry Potter, did not watch it. I just know that it has something about magic. I'm asked about Harry Potter a lot, so I have no idea what Harry Potter and what the story of Harry Potter is. Somebody's asking me. So I just read about it just so that when people ask me about it, I would know what they're actually talking to me about. I don't have to watch the movie to know about it. If there are any questions regarding this matter, if you feel that I didn't answer all the questions that I had claimed I was going to answer, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Nasreen. Long time no see, girl. How's it going?
I know. I missed you. Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
Alhamdulillah. All right, go ahead.
I had a question. I was just wondering. I heard that you can use someone's wudu that did black magic on you. I just wanted to know if that was true.
Not black magic. Not black magic. You could use the person that did envy on you. Not black magic, but envy. So let's say somebody envied you and you knew that person envied you. You started, for example, they said, oh, she's got the most beautiful hair, and all of a sudden she started getting hair loss, and the hair loss, and you're just getting really sick or whatever. All right, then you would say, well, let's say sister, Wafat, whatever her name is, I want you to do wudu. I really think that you had done envy on me, and it's actually haram for her to refuse. She has to accept to do that wudu. If you felt that there's a high chance that it was her and you wanted her to do that wudu. Now, the wudu doesn't involve washing the private parts. It actually involves doing, the outside wudu. So we're talking about, face, hands, head, feet. All right. And then you would combine that water and pour it over your shoulders or pour it over your waist, according to Al-Maziri. So just let you know, it's not magic. This is referring to envy, hasad.
Okay. And then I had yeah, thank you. And I had one more question. This is regarding jinn. I heard if you hear footsteps or something in your house, you can use salt and water and start reciting, I think, I could be wrong, just say A'udhu Billah or recite Qul Wallah and sprit it around the house.
So here's one thing. There's really no evidence on a lot of there's no evidence on a lot of the claimed ruqyas where whether you're using salt and water or whether you've got a bucket of water and you pour it over the person, etc. All these different things, there's really no evidence, but it's more, I would say, just empirical, meaning some of the raqis, they have done that and it worked with them, and it became known between a lot of the raqis that it works. Can you use it? The answer is yes, you can. You can if you want to, according to some scholars. There are differences of opinions between scholars on whether the only ruqya that is permissible is what is al-ma'thur. And some scholars said that it doesn't have to be al-ma'thur, but la ba'sa bil-ruqa ma lam yakun fiha shirk, as long as there's no shirk in it, and you're using, for example, the ayat or the du'as, and let's say you decided I guess, I don't know, buy those sprayer bottles from a dollar store, and you read Quran on it, and you started sprinkling that water in the corners of your house that you read Quran on, and you started spraying it in the corners of your house or in your living room, or you're afraid of something. There are some scholars that regarded, I mean, if there's no shirk in it and people tried it, or some people, raqis, professional raqis, not necessarily scholars, raqis, they did it and they said it worked and it helped cure some people, that you could actually do it. Other scholars said that no, you can't necessarily make it that generalized, in other words, that open, because that's going to bleed into superstition, which is really a good point. Because if you're going to go left and right and actually say, well, that person tried it and there's no shirk in it, and it worked with them and it cured her and she's doing fine today. She was struggling a lot, but then when she started spraying the waters around their house or whatever it is, or reading Quran and spraying it in front of her, I don't know, front yard or whatever it is, it helped her and it cured. All right. So it can bring in a lot of superstition. I'd be really careful about it. All right. And it really has. And there's actually a point to it there, that many people will, bring in a lot of these superstition things and actually claim that it has some kind of a cure. So definitely it does bring it within it. But at the same time, I can't necessarily say it's haram, because of the hadith in where, there's no shirk in it, and somebody's experience in where they experience that yes, I did it before and it helped me and there's no shirk in it. I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm actually reading the ayat and I'm I'm trying to find cure and it really helped me, and etc. You can't say no. You can't necessarily say you can't do that. So if you wanted to, there's no hadith to tell you that you could use salt and spray around the house. But one thing I would like to say is that don't give the jinn more power than what they really have. All right. So the jinn, the Prophet ﷺ said they can't even open a door. So don't expect that the jinn are going to be open a door and running down your hallway. Jinn don't like living around you. Jinn doesn't like living around human beings. Jinn doesn't like living during the time that you're even awake. They don't want to be around you. The jinn, they have their life. Jinn usually are in faraway areas, rural areas. They go really far and not around you. So they don't want to be home with you. So you're most likely safe from all of that. So nothing to worry about. So no, they're not going to be walking down your home and, trying to take your, I don't know, your jewelry and all that. No. Let's see. Jinns do trick. Jinns would trick raqis that it would work the same way they trick people, that something works. So the best is to stick to sunnah about ruqya. Sister Zainab, I've seen cases where these people are really harmed. It's so easy to just say, hey, just do this and that's it, and you should be okay. I've seen marriages fall apart, and you can clearly see that there is something wrong, when you do the ruqya and you see somebody throwing up blood, or when you do ruqya and you start somebody shaking and going into like a seizure, and you know that there's absolutely no way that this could be a voluntary movement, all right? And you see that this person, is bleeding constantly and all that. You see these things, and you see your own child or your own self, going through all these struggles, and where you can't live a normal life with your husband or your wife. You would really want to seek whatever works. It's so easy to just say, just do qul huwallahu ahad, the three quls, and you'll be fine, and don't worry about anything else. When you see that this is really harming me, this is really breaking my marriage apart, this is really destroying me, that's when you would want to go, I would say, easy, and stick to the part where لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. If it doesn't contain shirk, inshallah, it's permissible. It's so easy to just say, hey, just do this, and that's it. When you really need whatever can get you out of the dilemma that you're in, if it's not shirk, you're going to see the person do it. We go for chemo, all right? And we know very well that chemo is killing a lot of our good cells. But whatever it takes, if it means curing me from cancer, I'm going to do it. And that's the same thing. If it means la ba'sa bil ruqa, if it's not shirk and it's not haram, I'm going to do it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. I'm going to do it. If it means no shirk, if it's not haram, you're going to see the person willing to pay $6,000 and even more to get their marriage straight, or to get their children back to their normal state. They're going to pay $6,000 because they've probably they've went to psychologists, they went to raqis, they've went to here and there, and they've tried everything, and everything did not work. Trust me, they'll be hanging on, like we say, متعلق بقشة. They will hang on, even if it meant, when you're drowning, even if it meant just a hay or a piece of hay, if it means hang on to it to probably, maybe that'll save me from drowning, you're going to see people willing to pay $6,000 and $7,000 and $8,000 and $10,000, whatever it takes. If it's not shirk, it's not haram. I'm letting it like that, open like that. Yeah, you're going to be seeing a lot of people doing superstition, but we're just going to say, well, before you do that piece and say it's not shirk, and I'm not doing it this way, you're doing Quran, and I would just say i'radu. Rasul used to say i'radu alayya ruqakum, present it to a scholar and let them see whether it contains shirk or not, and then go from there. That's all I could say. Allahul Musta'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and protect you from any type of harm. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep away, the different harms that will affect us without us realizing. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from hasad, sihr, jinn, and protect us from all those different things out there, with what we know and what we don't know, and protect us from the evils of how many people will actually, whether prick us with the things that we know of in terms of diseases, or prick us with things that we might not know of how it affects us. And Allah al-Musta'an. Any other question? Because we need to go. All right. I think everyone else is finished with the questions. And I hope I answered the questions that I had promised to answer.